Joining us now, Ron Klain, former Chief of Staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, and a former senior aide to President Obama. He's also former Chief Counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Also with us, Tim O'Brien, executive editor of Bloomberg View, author of Trump Nation, and an MSNBC contributor who was mentioned, it turns out, in this testimony. Ron Klain, first to the committee, to the procedure. Your reaction to what the ranking member did today?
Well, Lawrence, I couldn't agree more with what you said at the outset. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more unlikely person than Dianne Feinstein doing this radical act today. But, you know, she really had no choice. A game of liar's poker was going on in the Senate Judiciary Committee. It was time to call an end to it. Just last week, Senator Grassley, Senator Graham proposed a criminal investigation into the British intelligence agent who put this material together. And so I think Senator Feinstein had no choice. She did the right thing today. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. And Senator Feinstein proved today to be the real advocate of sunshine, the real advocate of truth, and made a big difference for what we know about this investigation and what we know about the shenanigans that now have been going on the Republican side of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Tim O'Brien, in the testimony today, we see Glenn Simpson's description of how Fusion GPS, a firm like this, goes about this kind of research. And as he said, before even getting Christopher Steele on the case, the very first thing we do, when Fusion was hired to look into the affairs of Donald Trump, said the very first thing we do is we buy all the books on Amazon about the subject being Donald Trump, one of the books being Tim O'Brien's book. And he was especially grateful to the lawsuit that was provoked by your book because he found that a gold mine, too.
Yeah, I think, you know, Glenn Simpson is a former investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal. He approaches this stuff the way journalists approach it, which is to gather all known facts, assemble a fact pattern if you can, get up to speed about what's going on, and then send out some feelers. And it's very clear in this testimony that's exactly how he went about it. He didn't dodge a single question that he was asked. You could quibble with some of the facts here and there, but by and large, the portrait that emerges from this testimony is somebody who had an assignment from a client and followed it through. I think this is also in an environment in which the GOP has tried to make the Steele dossier the foundational document for the FBI investigation and the reason everything got started. And as we now know from this testimony and from reporting in the New York Times and elsewhere, it wasn't the foundational document. The FBI believed Chris Steele because he was confirming things that they already knew to be true through their own investigations. And the testimony today really puts a lot of narrative clothing on what went on and what led Steele ultimately to decide to tell the FBI what he knew.
Ron, one more point on Senator Feinstein's decision to do this today. If you were still on the Judiciary Committee staff, she would have asked you your advice about what to do in this situation. What would you have told her?
Well, I would have told her to do what she did today. Look, it is definitely an extraordinary act, but these are extraordinary times. And I think what happened recently, where the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee went all in on trying to spread a false narrative about this investigation, to try to get an investigation launched into Mr. Steele and into Fusion, that really left her no choice. It was creating a false impression about what had happened in this deposition. And so I think it was very important for her to correct the record. You know, it was like watching, the past few weeks has been like watching a 007 movie where in the second reel, the bad bureaucrats try to get you to believe that James Bond is actually the bad guy. And I think, you know, Senator Feinstein stood up for the truth today, put the chips on the table, and helped people understand that what Christopher Steele was doing was a patriotic act by someone who isn't even an American citizen, of letting the FBI know of a potential crime in progress. And for the Republicans to besmirch that and say that that was a crime, that was something Senator Feinstein couldn't let stand without being answered.
And let's listen to what Senator Feinstein said today when she was asked about why she did this.
Why did you decide to do that?
Oh, because I think people are entitled to know what was said. And the lawyers also wanted it released. I see no problem with releasing it.
But Senator Feinstein, Senator Grassley says you've jeopardized their ability to get certain witnesses like Kushner. Your reaction?
Oh, I don't think so. That's been difficult in any event.
Jared Kushner doesn't want to testify to that committee. But one of the things Chairman Grassley tried to say today was this will inhibit witnesses who want to come and testify to us privately and testify to the staff privately. The trouble is this witness was begging to have the transcript released.
And Chuck Grassley has no standing right now on this issue. Let's remember it was just last Friday night, as Ron pointed out, that Lindsey Graham and Chuck Grassley decided to make the first criminal referral in the congressional, at least the first one we know about publicly, in the congressional investigation, targeting the very person who had played a role in bringing some of this to light. I don't think he's got any standing to criticize the release of this document. And what we now know that it's a public document is that there's actually nothing explosive in it. It elaborates on some things we already knew, and it's a good document for the public to have.
And Ron, as we read through the story told in this transcript, we see Glenn Simpson, but primarily Christopher Steele, taking it upon himself to try to bring this information to the attention of the FBI. He did that. He wasn't sure what the FBI was doing with it. He wasn't really getting any feedback about what he was doing with it. Also brought it to the attention of Senator John McCain through a totally separate channel. John McCain's aide, who wanted to have this information, Senator McCain gets involved in this. And you never hear any references from Lindsey Graham about what was Senator McCain doing looking into this Fusion GPS report.
Yeah, Lawrence, I mean, I think the pivot here by Senator Graham from being side by side with Senator McCain as a Trump skeptic, a Trump critic, to now being the biggest cheerleader for Donald Trump, his golf courses, and his agenda is a stunning and very sad pivot from someone who had independence in the Senate. And I think that's another reason why I think Senator Feinstein did what she did today. Here, she saw her Republican colleagues. You know, the Judiciary Committee is not the most partisan committee in the Senate. Historically, it's been a place where there has been bipartisanship on investigative matters. And to see her Republican colleagues go so far and so hard to the pro-Trump side, I think provoked the kind of act, the extraordinary act we saw from her today.
Tim O'Brien, your organization, Bloomberg, reporting tonight that Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's longtime lawyer, is now suing BuzzFeed for being the first one to release the Fusion GPS so-called dossier, and suing Fusion GPS, and suing Christopher Steele. What do you make of this lawsuit?
I think Michael Cohen, like everyone else in the Trump universe, needs to get schooled on the libel standard. It's actual malice. They'd have to show that BuzzFeed published this document with strong, either outright knowing or strongly believing that everything in the document was false. They clearly didn't. They thought there was a public value in publishing it. And they did. I don't think a New York court is going to give him much hearing.
He knows this is a hopeless lawsuit. He's got enough experience, even with Trump's idiotic lawsuits with you, to know that. Did he do this today in reaction to this testimony being released? Did you think he was sitting there waiting, timing, deciding, I'm going to have my lawsuit ready to file when we need a counter story?
I don't know, because there's an extraordinary amount of stars aligning on this. You know, Ben Smith, the editor of BuzzFeed, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that published tonight saying he was glad they published the document. Mm-hmm. You had the Simpson transcript get released today, and now you got Michael Cohen suing over all this. I doubt he knew any of it was coming. I think one of the things you always see in the Trump family, so to speak, is that they're all willing to please the master, and that they'll follow in his footsteps and essentially try to weaponize the legal system and go after people they perceive to be their opponents. This is very Trumpy.
Tim O'Brien, congratulations on at least one book sale to Fusion GPS so that they could begin their investigation of Donald Trump, and you taking your rightful place in this testimony. Tim O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us tonight.